Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, burninating the countryside, burninating all the people. This is Reign of Fire. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Reign of Fire, which we're talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, it's the middle of summer, red hot outside, and yesterday we had a power outage in my neighborhood. Funny enough, it was planned and announced in advance. Power company said they were doing an upgrade, but I think they might have actually just been giving us a little practice run because this weekend, hurricane is going to hit Southern California.
Sheesh, when was the last time that happened?
They're kind of saying it's unprecedented. They talk about tropical storms coming up from Baja sometimes, but I've never heard it put quite like this. So it's a little spooky. I don't think that it's a real threat. I'm not on the coast and I'm not in a low-lying desert area, which they say is where you got to worry about the flooding. So charging my batteries and just going to hope for the best.
That's probably a good sign, right? Unprecedented hurricanes in Southern California. It's
yeah.
probably a sign that the earth is happy and everything's going well for it.
Letting us know that we're right on track.
Sweet. It's been raining a bunch here, but just rain, no wind.
Good.
We did have a freaky lightning storm last weekend. I went to Long Island and did a little nacho crawl, as I'm wont to do.
Oh, yummy.
With my friends. And I stayed at my friend Craig's house, who lives on Long Island. And I slept through it, apparently, but my wife did not. No one else did. There was like a 45-minute of just like nonstop lightning strikes.
That's terrifying.
I'm happy I was not awake for it because I probably would not have been able to fall back asleep. But pretty freaky stuff. The weather is just frightful, and it's not even wintertime yet.
Yes, I would certainly prefer to be under nacho anesthesia when a giant thunderstorm struck because the loud sounds, they frighten me.
It's a nacho anesthesia, a little bit of alcohol anesthesia too, because you got to get a beer with your nachos, you know?
Oh, you certainly do.
Before we get into Reign of Fire, you know how this goes. We've both been watching something, but I'm going to talk about that. So I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Okay.
Why don't you tell me what you watched this week that you thought was cool?
You know, I like to bring new movies once in a while. I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is out now on some kind of digital media format. Many people may have seen it. Did pretty well. It's a movie that really yanks on the levers of sentimentality, you might say, with a heavy hand. You can see the gears turning when you're watching this movie, but still it kind of worked on me. Like I felt feelings and I got choked up when it was trying to get me choked up. The drama of the movie mostly stays in the boundaries of what you expect, superhero, sci-fi, action, except for the fact that at a couple points, each of the main heroes let out soul-shattering screams that are so painful and full of grief that like I actually became uncomfortable. Like, these are good actors and they're making me uncomfortable. And also there's a ton of gross out action, which we know that James Gunn loves to do.
Absolutely.
And I figure that he thinks it balances out the sappy stuff. He can do really sentimental, sappy stuff and then a bunch of really gross out action. And this time the movie's PG-13, unlike The Suicide Squad, which was really gory. So instead of gore, it's like mucus splattering everywhere.
Yeah,
like
a lot of aliens that are with green slime.
Yeah, a lot of yellow goop, green slime. I could have used a little less of everything in this movie, including the runtime. It was just about 2.5 hours, a little bit ponderous for a rollicking action comedy. But overall, I had fun, and I don't regret the 4 days it took me to finish watching it.
Well, James Gunn, he's from the Trauma studio, right? Like, it's where he got his start, I thought.
Okay, that explains his...
So that makes a lot of sense. But trauma gore is not, like, scary at all. Like, it's all just meant to gross you out. It's the kind of thing you, like, laugh and half cover your eyes while you watch.
Exactly. I did a lot of that.
But I do like the Guardians movies. I haven't watched this one yet, but can you fill me in on if it feels like these are the last times we're going to see these characters in the MCU, or do you think they'll pop up again?
They kind of deal with this is the end kind of thing at the end, but not in any like, whoa, they just fucking burned the bridges way. So I don't know what they got planned, but it's all pretty safe.
Nice. Let me tell you what I watched, and you know about it because you started watching it after I finished it.
I sure did.
Because I gave it pretty much the highest recommendation I could. I was really enthralled by it. And it is the 2020 USA series, limited series, Briar Patch. Whether it was meant to be a limited series or not, I'm not sure, but it does wrap up quite nicely. So if you're worried about cliffhangers, don't be.
That's good.
So this is from our cohort now. Like, what'd you call him
these
our
people?
peer. I feel like we're not quite his peer, but
We're not,
we do the same
maybe
job.
not on their level, but we have an affinity for talking about movies and TV.
So Andy Greenwald of the Watch podcast and the Hollywood Prospectus before that was the creative force behind this, the showrunner. He wrote a bunch of the episodes, executive produced by Sam Ismail of Mr. Robot fame. So I've been an avid Watch listener for many years. And I'll be honest, Andy Greenwald has been disparaging in the past about some shows that I really enjoy.
Okay.
Our tastes align more often than they don't. But at the same time, I was like, here's a TV critic, essentially, getting into the creative game. And there was a little bit of me being like, all right, let's see what you got. You can tell everyone else what they do wrong. What do you know that they don't? And it turns out quite a bit. This show fucking rules.
He brought it.
What a blast of a series this is. It's got mystery and intrigue. It's got action. It's got like a David Lynchian weirdness to it as well, where there's like some dreamy sequences. There's some fun little details, like a zoo that just got blown up before the events of the show. So there's just zoo animals running around sometimes. It's got an amazing cast. Rosario Dawson is the star. J.R. Ferguson plays a kind of war criminal, gun runner, who's like semi-retired, living in luxury, but as a real true blue Texan. And by true blue, I guess I mean true red. But the role he was born to play, in my opinion, you've got Kim Dickens being charming and wonderful as always. It's just a stacked cast, a great show, keeps you on the edge of your seat, and wraps up quite nicely. So if you guys are looking for a new show to start, it's 10 episodes. They're about 42 minutes each, I think, because it did actually air on TV, despite the fact that there's some pretty gnarly violence and some F-bombs even that get dropped. I think people are realizing that you don't have to censor yourself on cable now. There's no law that says you do. If you're not on a network, like, you can curse. So I highly recommend it. I know you're a couple episodes in at least, right?
Yeah, I think I'm on episode 4. I'm loving it. And you're right. This aired on USA Network, but this could have gone anywhere on Prestige TV and held its own. It's a really good show.
I feel like the fact that it was on USA really hampered it. Not that USA TV shows were bad, but they had the whole Blue Skies initiative. They never really got too serious. The stakes were never that high. The situations were never that dire. Burn Notice and Suits and Psych, Monk, all shows that I really enjoy, but there's like a sameness to them. They're fun and they're rollicking, but they're not exactly serious. And Briar Patch is, in every sense of the word, a serious show, even though it's funny. Like, it's seriously made by serious people who are serious about TV.
It has that quality of literary crime fiction to it. I don't know much about the author whose novel Andy Greenwald adapted into this, but it has a depth to it. It has a lot of really cool touches that elevate it.
Did you watch it on Paramount Plus?
No. I
think it got taken down from, I think it was one of the series that was like deleted from streaming.
Oh, wow.
I have an app that tells me where stuff is streaming. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere with a subscription. You'd have to buy it either through Apple or Amazon and buy it the whole season, but I think it's pretty affordable. So
okay.
Get on that if you're looking for a new show. But it's Rain of Fire time, Ian.
Okay.
So let's jump in the fire. What'd you know about this movie before we sat down to start researching it for the pod?
Very little. When you said the name, I could place it. I knew it was a dragon movie. I could maybe picture Christian Bale, but I wasn't even aware that it was set in the future. So that's just a sign of how little I knew about what this was.
It's kind of set in our present day now, 2020, I think,
that's
right?
True. Yes.
So it was the future at the time.
Yeah, it starts out in the year 2002, pretty much, when it came out. Then it fast forwards. But it looks like a medieval dragon movie. It's not that. And maybe that's one of the best things it has going for it, is that it has a clever premise that fools you.
On paper, the movie has a lot going for it between the cast, the premise, and we talked about it off mic, but there's a lot of really fun little world building details that get sprinkled in throughout that help make it feel a little more thoughtful than your typical dragon movie. But then the execution of a lot of those ideas just kind of falls flat for me.
It has a professional veneer, and then you look closer and it has a little bit of an amateur feel to it.
Which is crazy for a big CGI spectacle starring Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey, you'd expect. But like, it was kind of written by amateurs and it was directed by a guy who'd only really directed one movie before this. It's an interesting place in everyone's career, like in the cast too. You could look at where they were and it starts to make sense, but it's just kind of a curio.
Yeah, it's hard to tell in the rearview mirror because of how successful the stars were, Bale and McConaughey, after this. So you're like, oh, this is two of the biggest stars in Hollywood, but kind of wasn't at the time this was made, right?
And McConaughey had been one of the biggest stars in Hollywood for a stretch before this too, but people thought his best days were behind him by the time that he was in this. And Bale had done American Psycho a couple of years before, but that wasn't like a big mainstream hit. It was well reviewed and he got praise for his performance, but he wasn't an A-lister yet.
No, that was a little bit culty, that one.
So it's a movie I saw in theaters. I can certainly tell you that much.
Oh, wow. Do you remember how you took it when you saw it? Were you into it?
I think I was like 15 18, so I was
okay.
like, fuck yeah. But I did want to also issue a correction. I made a big faux pas last week. On said nacho crawl with my friend Craig, he reminded me that me and him did go to the movies to watch Zodiac when it came out.
Oh, wow.
I had forgotten that completely.
Yes.
In my defense, it was 16 years ago.
It's a while back. It's cool to know that you did it. It's good to have a friend who can remind you of stuff like that. That movie's important to you.
Just trying to convince my wife to watch it now.
Oh, okay. She's never seen it.
No, we watched my favorite movie together shortly after it came to home video, No Country for Old Men, and she did not like it. So, she takes my recommendations with a grain of salt, but she likes Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo, so I don't think she's quite as fond of Javier Bardem and Josh Brolin.
The killing scenes will be hard to take, but like we said, there's a lot of good workplace buddies in that movie.
And a lot of comedy. Underrated comedic
That's
movie.
true.
But I'm turning this into Zodiac Part 2, which we joked about doing at the end of last week's episode.
That's true. It's coming true. It's happening.
But we should focus on Reign of Fire. So did you want me to go through the making of it and how it all came together?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. Friends and collaborators Kevin Paterka and Greg Shabat had a novel idea sometime in 1996. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a movie about dragons ruling the earth in modern times? So they wrote a script, which they sold to Spyglass Media Group. When interest in actually making the movie started to grow, they hired Matt Greenberg, mostly known for working on horror scripts like Children of the Corn 3, Urban Harvest, Mimic, and Halloween H2O, to rewrite the script and make it viable for the big screen.
Please, sir, sprinkle some of your Children of the Corn 3 magic on us.
Greenberg handed in the new treatment, and Touchstone Pictures scooped it up to get it made. With a $60 million budget, the film had a challenge on their hand: how to make a CGI-intensive dragon epic on a mid-sized budget. They achieved this by casting rising stars who didn't yet command A-list salaries like Christian Bale and Gerard Butler, combined with casting actors who many thought had their best days behind them, like Matthew McConaughey and Izabella Scorupco. Rob Bowman, mostly known for his work on the X-Files TV show and also directing the first X-Files movie, which rules by the way, was brought in to direct.
I want to believe that.
With filming set to begin in Ireland's Wicklow Mountains, all was well, except for an outbreak of foot and mouth disease which rocked Europe and severely limited their filming location options, even leading to some entire planned sequences being abandoned due to quarantine restrictions. There was also the complicating presence of a way too serious for this movie McConaughey, who demanded all the actors and crew refer to him by his character's name of Denton Van Zandt, even if they ran into him at a restaurant or bar after filming.
Dude, that's not all right. All right? All right.
Special Effects Studio's Secret Lab handled the film's many CGI shots, and having disliked the rubbery look of some scaled creatures in movies like Jurassic Park, Lake Placid, and Dragonheart, expanded on the work done by Neil Scurry on Disney's 2000 film Dinosaur to make more realistic-looking creatures.
Good job. They look just like real dragons.
Filming wrapped in July of 2001, and they had a year to get the film ready for a big summer 2002 release. Released on July 12, 2002, the movie opened in third place with only $15.6 million, behind Road to Perdition and Men in Black 2.
About $8 of that came from a young Jon Drake.
The reviews were also mediocre, with many critics praising the performances and CGI, but lamenting the movie's super serious tone and gray color palette. Eventually, the movie would only make $82.2 million, losing the studio about $30 million. All plans for a sequel were canceled, and the movie now serves as a curiosity on the filmographies of its stars.
A lot of the movie does rely on the two leads just kind of looking like leads, because an unfortunate amount of this movie is stuff that looks like what should happen in a big action movie. And then it kind of just doesn't connect. It doesn't quite actually happen. Like you go, oh, that's the troubled hero and he's very dark and moody. But actually, well, not really. In this scene, he's not actually what he looks like.
He's just a nice guy who's trying to help
He's a
everybody.
super nice guy. And then like, oh, he's going to struggle with the decisions that he makes and they're going to lead to tragedy and he's going to have to, and like, no, just stuff kind of happens and he just goes along with it. There's a lot of that, and it slowly sinks in that you're not getting what you thought you paid for.
Not to mention that the nigh unstoppable badass U.S. National Guardsman Van Zandt is kind of fucking terrible at his job.
Talk about like sneaky comedy from Zodiac. This movie, it's actually hilarious. Van Zandt is a farce.
The Emperor has no clothes.
But McConaughey plays it so straight and so serious, and he's very good at that. So you go with him, but then it slowly dawns on you that this guy guy is a total fuck up.
He kind of plays him like an early Rust Cole before he became Rust Cole. He's got that steely-eyed intensity. He doesn't blink a lot.
Yeah.
But whereas Rust Cole was like super competent, Van Zandt is just like a fucking idiot. All his plans backfire. And if you watch it through that lens, it is almost like an unintentional comedy.
Yeah.
Like take a shot every time a Van Zandt idea goes horribly wrong.
But the movie never acknowledges it, though. It never winks
No.
at you and goes, see? Even when it could, because obviously he's the foil. He's not actually a bad guy, but he's intimidating and he provides
Abrasive. He's kind of a dick.
He's the cause of the big threat in the hero's life, and Quinn is obviously the hero. But so, like, you could have that lens through which Quinn gets an I told you so or something in there. But no, Quinn is way too decent, way too humble in a way that's also weird because it doesn't look like he's going to be that guy. When you dig into it, these ironies actually make the movie way more interesting than it should be.
But it feels completely unintentional. There's no way that they were trying to achieve that. They just accidentally did by not really writing it correctly.
I agree.
So some interesting casting here for the American National Guard. We get Polish/Swedish actress Izabella Scorupco as Kentucky National Guardsman Alex Jensen. I was like, why are you doing that? Just make her like you flew all the way from Europe. Like maybe you got there 6 months ago and found her.
She could have been anything else, really. It's an all-American crew, except it doesn't need to be, and nobody else's personality really comes in. The skydiver guys have a couple little quips, but everyone else is totally generic in that crew.
I can't make heads or tails of some of the choices in this movie. Before we get too far astray and start nitpicking, should we get into the plot?
Yeah, let's jump in. We've got a lot of little details that we're going to want to nitpick about in there.
Indeed.
In the year 2000, an English boy named Quinn is playing in the London Underground construction tunnels where his mom works. There, he discovers a dragon who spits in his eye and proceeds to rampage across the globe, rapidly reproducing thousands more dragons and nearly driving humanity extinct. 20 years later, in a castle in the north of England, Quinn, played by Christian Bale, leads a small community trying to raise a new generation of children and barely scraping by. Around him are his best friend Creedy, played by Gerard Butler, and an orphan teen named Jared. As an example of their challenges, one hungry man named Eddie defies Quinn and takes his family out to harvest tomatoes early. This attracts a dragon who torches the crops and kills Eddie's son as Quinn rushes out to rescue the others.
A lot of questions about the intro to this movie, which takes place in the year 2000 in London. Like, why the fuck is like a 12-year-old boy getting sent into I believe they called it a void in the tunnel?
Yes. At first, you're like, what the fuck is he doing on this construction site? But then they kind of, they give you that. And that's fun when the various guys start greeting him. Hey, Quinn, how are you?
He doesn't even have a hard hat on. Where is OSHA? Or the British version of OSHA.
The British version of OSHA, whatever that is. Yes, it's very clear that everybody on this construction site is wearing a hard hat. And if you've been alive in the world, you know that they don't wear hard hats for fun. They wear hard hats when they're required to. And so, whoa, what's the boy doing with his bare head out amidst all this machinery? He goes down underground and he meets this guy. So the story is, his mom is busy. She's an engineer on this project and they stop the drill because they found a void and what if it's unsafe? But this one unsavory dude goes, why don't you go inside and have a wee look to the boy? And you think,
gives him a flashlight.
Yeah, you think he's joking, but he hands him a flashlight, watches the boy crawl in the hole and then he walks away. Like he's in some other part of the tunnel at the point that they hear the next sound that something's going wrong.
Arguing with like somebody else about like how it's unsafe to be working down there now.
They hear a big noise and he goes, no, don't go there. It's unsafe conditions. You just watched your coworker's boy crawl in that hole. What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? And I guess he's the first one to die. So I guess it was a tiny little horror movie comeuppance scene, but it really didn't quite make sense.
You also get the vibe that that void smells really bad. They make a big deal about how bad the dragons smell throughout the movie.
Yeah, there's some wrinkling of noses.
As soon as little Quinn walks in, he's covering his nose. It just blew my mind that they would do this.
Even if you did not believe in dragons, there's a million other reasons why you don't send a boy into this hole.
Yeah, this guy might be the true villain of the movie because the dragons they're just doing what they do. They're animals. They're not evil.
Yeah, he bought it though. He got the first blast. They show him about to light his cigarette when a humongous roar erupts from behind him.
How did you feel about the dragon reveal in the void? Kind of hard to follow, I thought.
Yes, and I think that's going to be a recurring theme for us. One of the defining characteristics of these dragons is they're hard to follow. Now you see them, now you don't. And it starts here. This void space looks a little creepy. It's got melty yellowish walls. And you're like, okay, something's in here. And then something really weird happens. The dragon pops up and he spits in Quinn's eyes.
Yeah, it's the only time we ever see them spit without activating the other side of the tube to make the fire. He just spits like the
some of his chemical, like some of his stuff. But at this point, we don't know that. Like the dragons, we later learn, make fire by they have two two different chemicals that spray out of their mouths, and when they combine, they ignite.
Which, interestingly, has become kind of the accepted way that dragons make fire in the more realistic dragon media like Game of Thrones, Harry Potter.
Okay.
They've just kind of stole that from Reign of Fire. So this movie does have a bit of a legacy in that regard.
It's a good touch. And like you said, there's some really cool world building touches. Like that's a sophisticated thing that you might not expect to see in this movie. But like this really led me down the wrong direction because it's not just that he spit in his eye, which is weird. I mean, first of all, it's off-putting. There's a boy in a hole. You see a dragon's face and then the dragon goes, like it makes this spitty noise and it's got spit in his eye, like a big blob of mucus on his eye.
It's rude is what it is.
He runs out of the hole. He finds his mom and they don't just go, oh, it's a dragon. We got to run. She goes, I need to take you to the eye wash station. She's cleaning out his eyes. They spent some time doing special effects makeup on this boy. The whites of his eyes have turned all red and horrible looking like he's really.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a thing. They are really establishing this for us. I was 100% sure that, as in other dragon stories, by being touched by some aspect of the dragon, this boy was now enchanted and would have a magical power, a secret power for him to use at the end of the movie to defeat the dragon. That didn't happen, did it? Did I miss it?
No, not at all. Yeah, maybe like we see the dragon vision at times. Maybe that's how Quinn could see the world now or something.
Yes,
like
he could see through their, I don't know, dragon vision, dragon sight.
Has a psychic connection with the alpha because that's the one that spits on him is the one he faces off with later. There's a lot of ways they could have went with it and they just kind of went, I spit in his eye.
They went, no, it's not anything, dude. He just spits on him. He's a mean dragon. Okay.
What a jerk. So then obviously the mom gets, we don't really know how she dies. She just like the dragon is climbing up the elevator and being scary and then she's dead.
He partially crushes the elevator and it kind of just kills her. But I like that about it. I'm like, she died in a tragic feeling way. I thought that was a good touch.
Totally. And then when we catch up with Quinn, he is now Christian Bale hacking away with a pickaxe.
Yeah, making his own tunnel for some reason, which we won't learn till the end.
You pointed this out because I was like, what the fuck is he mining for? Do they need copper? But it seems like he's trying to dig deeper so that they have a place to hide if a dragon does come.
He's making a dragon bomb shelter, which it took him 20 years to come up with that idea. I don't know. It seemed like a lot of the stuff happening in this movie isn't quite situated with the time frame.
I think Christian Bale was like, McConaughey gets a ton of beefcake shots in this movie. Like, where's my beefcake shot? I need my shirt off. I need to be swinging a pickaxe, looking all jacked up. But the degree to which the survivors living in this castle are jacked up is kind of upsetting and takes you out of the movie because we're getting told repeatedly they're starving to death.
Yeah.
And then Christian Bale looks like he just chugged a 64-ounce fucking protein shake every shot he's in. And I'm like, I'm not buying it, man. Like, none of these people look like, and they're not like moving slow, like they're hungry.
No.
Everybody just kind of walking around like, oh, I'm so hungry. We're going to die.
Most of the drama of this first act is this desperate move made by this guy named Eddie, who's getting ready to defy Christian Bale's Quinn's authority as the leader of the castle and go harvest some food. He's like, my kids are dying. Fuck next season. We're not going to make it through the winter. But it doesn't really play. A normal movie would show a scene of a kid like getting too small a portion and going, is that all there is, Dad? You know, like give him some reason that he's so desperate.
Or somebody comes up to Quinn's like, oh, we lost another one.
Yeah.
Something. It doesn't sell that drama at all. It just makes this Eddie guy seem like a reckless dickbag. You had a very funny observation about Christian Bale's English accent, which why don't you walk us through that?
Is this a thing? Christian Bale, I had to look it up. He's from England. He's English.
You didn't know that?
No, I thought I knew that.
Okay.
But you hear his English accent in this movie and it sounds fake. I'm like, what's going on here?
Turn around, Vance. He cuts all his words off like too soon, I think. Like it's a really clipped speaking pattern. And you did some digging, found out he moved to LA as a teenager. So maybe he was starting to lose it a little bit.
And I think he moved around a lot as a kid within England and Wales. And he might just have a weird mishmash kind of English accent that gives him trouble when he goes to portray a London kid on screen. But it kind of takes you out of the movie for a second when you go, okay, well, no, it's real. He's English. Let's go with it.
If you listen to his Terminator Salvation set rant, you know, the oh, good for you one that was so popular on the internet. Like he does have a very mild English accent when he's in like his regular speaking voice, but it does feel like he's kind of just collected certain pronunciations from different cultures and different cities he's lived in. So it's a unique accent, but I don't think that's like his natural speaking. Like I think he's doing an English accent even though he's English. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like he wanted to sound like he's trying to do like a London accent as opposed to whatever his normal one is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of bad. And then his best friend's Scottish, clearly, because Gerard Butler can only do one voice.
Oh, yeah, he's letting his Scottish hang out full on.
I mean, he lets his Scottish hang out in Den of Thieves when he's supposed to be an LA cop. So he just doesn't have a good English accent or American accent either. So he's Gerard Butler, who gets some top-notch dialogue in this movie to let us know that him and Quinn are best friends. He goes, I'm your best friend, and even I don't like you sometimes. I'm like, oh, that's great writing. When you just come out and tell us, I've been your best friend, Creedy, for 12 years now.
That's the textbook example of how not to write exposition. Have the character walk up and say, hello, I'm your best friend.
They do it with his little protege, too. He's like, you're not my real dad. You just found me one day and took care of me. It's like, yeah.
That's right. It was 20 years ago today. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of really clunky dialogue in this movie. And as we were talking about off air, the dialogue is mixed really low.
Yes, I fucking hated that.
It's one of those real problem movies from the era of recent Hollywood where they were mixing effects super loud and dialogue super low. And you may be tempted to turn on subtitles. My tip for anyone who decides to watch this movie, just don't do it. It's better when you don't know. You can make up something that you thought they said that was probably better than what they said.
Yeah, you can kind of piece together the movie just from the visuals.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty effects-heavy movie, but I have a sound bar that I watch all my movies on, and I have it set up specifically. It's multi-channel, so the middle channel is usually where the dialogue comes from, and I have it set to dialogue mode, which is supposed to turn down all the side channels and turn up the middle channel, and I still had to keep reaching for the volume button and lowering it during action scenes and turning it up during dialogue scenes, which is like one of my least favorite things to have to do during a movie. It's extremely annoying. It takes you out of the experience. So yeah, there's nothing to be done about it now, but the sound mixing on this movie is fucking terrible.
Best to just leave it at the lower level and then just kind of get the gist of what they're saying by the poses they're striking, which is enough.
A lot of posing, especially from McConaughey in this movie.
Yeah, no, you're getting so much from him just from that.
But he hasn't even shown up yet. So let's talk about some more life in the castle.
Yeah.
Life in the castle.
Surely make you lose your mind. They're doing what they can for this group of kids, right? So what you were saying, Gerard Butler's character, not only does he have to tell Quinn that he's his best friend, he has to tell him what his personality is like, because we're not seeing what they want us to see on screen. He goes, even I don't like you sometimes. And you're like, oh yeah, Quinn is a real dickhead. He's hard for everybody to like. And then every single other scene is Quinn doing just the most incredibly charming and loving things for these kids that he's surrounded by. He's a wonderful man.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart.
But you were told from the start that he's not. So it takes a while to sink in this cognitive dissonance that they establish.
They're putting on this live performance of the climactic battle from Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
And Quinn is playing Darth Vader with a fencing mask on that they've painted black. And it's adorable. But my question is, like, all these kids are in this colony. There's probably like 40 of them in this room just watching this performance. Did the dragons burn all the prophylactics or what's going on here? What about the end of humanity makes you want to just keep fucking like that? Because I wouldn't, like, it's more mouths to feed, man. Wrap it up. Pull out method, the rhythm method, something.
They're doing the Lord's work, trying to repopulate the world.
You got to fix the dragon problem before you repopulate the world.
The other thing is, like, where are the moms? There's almost no women in this castle.
Not a lot of women.
There's a handful of men that you see running around and picking up guns when trouble breaks out. There's just a very few women. So it's like, man, these poor ladies are doing some work to bear this many children because there's a lot of them.
Eddie's wife is up for grabs now, I guess. You know, if you want to woo her in the castle, because Eddie's gone.
Wait, no, Eddie survived.
Oh, that fucking dickhead survives.
He got his son killed is what he did.
Right.
When he went out to harvest the tomatoes, which raises another question. We were talking about how good the little world building touches are. This group of people in the grayest northern England environment you've ever seen is growing tomatoes. That's their prime crop.
Not the hardiest of crops, not the most filling. What is filling and has been documented to grow extremely well in almost all conditions is fucking potatoes.
Oh.
But I know they filmed in Ireland. Maybe they didn't want to cultivate a stereotype, but onions, root vegetables, tubers, get some turnips. That's what you grow there.
It's weird. My only theory is that they think tomatoes are more cinematic because it's got this super gray landscape. Sky is totally gray at all times. There's mist floating everywhere. And then there's these glorious green vines filled with red ripe tomatoes. But you're like, how did those things ever grow in the first place? And how did the dragon not discover the tomatoes until they were ripe for harvest? They kind of stick out on the countryside.
Also, it's not that many tomatoes there.
No.
They're walking around with like bags the size of pillowcases. So you're going to feed how many people for how many days with that many tomatoes? Like, Quinn had a point there. It's not ready. Got to give it some more time.
It doesn't all add up.
Before we move on to section 2, what did you think of the dragon attack? It's our first time kind of seeing them in the modern day or the time period where the movie takes place primarily.
Yeah.
So did you think it was a solid action scene or how are they presented?
They look pretty good. They're very traditional dragons. Like they didn't throw any curveballs. They look very classically dragony.
Very English dragons too. If you look at the different drawings from the past of different cultures and how they envision them, they look like English dragons.
They're a nice design. And for the time that they're on screen, they look pretty good. You don't cringe at the CGI or anything. But they did one main thing, which is play hide the dragon mostly, because you talked about they didn't quite have the budget to just put them on screen full time. So they made this like unspoken quality of the dragons is that they are masters of stealth. And despite the fact that they're 100 feet long, and when they do appear, they're just enormous, thunderous, they're screaming. They also have the ability to entirely disappear and pop up from right behind you with not a hint that they were there.
And fly incredibly fast, too, keeping up with this helicopter later, which is apparently a helicopter model renowned for its speed.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's clearly a budgetary thing to have them be so stealthy, but it is weird and kind of against their characterization of they ran roughshod over the world and just burned it down within a couple decades. But they did it real sneaky.
Yeah, it robs you of something of this sort of thundering terror of this inevitable thing coming at you, and you can see it, but you can't do anything about it. Whereas it's a bunch of people like looking over their shoulders. Oh, there's nothing there. It's perfectly silent in this orchard. And then boom, a dragon is up your ass. Oh, didn't see that coming.
You did call out that they have hawks on all their perches that they will go to for any alerts about dragons, which again, nice touch. I like that stuff. I even liked the Time magazine cover about the end of the world.
Yes.
I don't know how realistic it is that the printing presses were still running when most of the major cities were destroyed already.
Yeah, you can think, okay, maybe that's a picture of England and they hadn't taken over the US yet. And so that issue got out. But yeah, all the retro stuff, they do some flashback stuff of newsreel type things, newspapers and magazine covers. All that's done really well. So a lot of the sci-fi aspects are handled quite nicely.
It just, the movie fumbles big details and gets the small stuff right, which is, it was almost there. It was so close.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for me to walk through the middle part?
Yeah, let's hear what happens next.
We meet our quote unquote hero, Van Zandt.
Yeah.
All right. One day, a group of American soldiers roll up to the castle with a bunch of armored vehicles, a tank, and a helicopter. Quinn doesn't trust them or their intense leader, Denton Van Zandt, played by Matthew McConaughey. But claiming to be an experienced dragon slayer, Van Zandt convinces Quinn to let his crew take shelter in the castle temporarily. Soon after, Van Zandt and crew attempt a dragon hunting mission, which involves complex coordination between the chopper, a crew of skydivers, and a fast-moving team on the ground. But Van Zandt's soldiers are bested by the dragon, who kills 3 of them before Quinn rushes out to save the day and help bring the beast down. That night, the castle community celebrates the death of a dragon, but Van Zandt chastises them for partying while his men are dead and dragons still dominate the earth. Then Van Zandt and his pilot Alex, Izabella Scorupco, explain their big theory and master plan to Quinn. All the dragons around the world are female, and they rely on a single male dragon in London to fertilize their eggs. That's the one they need to kill. Van Zandt wants to recruit some of Quinn's best fighters to go to London with his crew. To stop this, Quinn has a knockdown, drag-out fistfight with Van Zandt, but he loses and must stay behind and watch as the convoy sets out for London.
The movie starts over in the second act because the antagonist just showed up, and takes a while to figure out, like, you expect him to be evil, because McConaughey looks sinister and freaky enough that he could have been a pure evil villain, although he turns out to be a good ally in the end. What do you think of? Or
his intentions were good.
Not a great ally, but he tried.
As a bald guy with a beard. We were talking off mic and I was like, oh, he kind of looks like a Nazi. He's bald, he's got a beard. And then I was like, ah, shit. But he's also got these kind of weird, like, tribal tattoos everywhere. He's wearing a vest with no shirt on underneath it, which is a red flag if I've ever seen one. He's just super intense and kind of antagonistic. Yeah. So you're not sure what his deal is, but Quinn is even more trusting than the audience because everyone's like, don't let him in, whatever you do. And he's like, oh, you seem all right. Come on in. And,
and then he has to explain it to his guys, including Creedy. He's like, no, well, you weren't there when I let him in. I really thought he was good. Like, he's backtracking because they start to seem like a bad idea later that they have let him in. And once again, Quinn is he's way funnier than you can give him credit for during the first watch of this movie. He's just so humble. And even with the Eddie scene in that first act, Eddie totally fucks up, gets his own son killed, ruins their crops. And the aftermath of it, there's a fallout scene where Quinn contemplates it and he goes, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing leading this group. So it's like he's humble to a fault and beyond.
Well, he's kind of like grooming his little protege to take over. The kid's 14.
Yeah.
He's not ready.
But look at everybody else in the castle. They're all 8 and they're wearing their little sleepy jammies around day and night. They can't do shit.
He's like the 5th oldest person in that castle. But yeah, more Quinn being charming. He's just like brewing up a pot of tea when Izabella Scorupco comes in looking for a whetstone.
Yeah.
And he's like offering her refreshments. I'm like, you guys just said you're starving.
No, he's immediately a sweetheart in the kitchen with her.
It's probably the hottest woman he's seen in 20 years.
That's true. That could explain quite a bit.
And they clearly have a thing for each other. They have no chemistry as actors, though.
But they just stare at each other a little bit and you get the point.
After Van Zandt just beats the absolute fuck out of Quinn, she rubs his lip for like way too long. You think she's going to rub the blood off his lip and just keep going, but then she just kind of hovers there. It's real weird.
I guess we had a lot more fun than we might have admitted with this movie.
But not in the way the filmmakers intended, for sure.
No. So Van Zandt does this super complicated dragon fight, but just like in the first bit of action, Quinn has to save the day.
Yeah.
He just explained, he's like, nah, dude, we got a system down. It's scientific. We've got all this gear, this whole routine. Our people have been through it. We've killed 100 dragons this way. And then they go to fight the first one they fight. They lose 3 of their guys.
He must have started with an army of 1 million to still have like 200 guys left after killing 100 dragons with this method. It's so fucking complicated.
It's not that good. Like this dragon, they don't tell you that, oh, they came up against this especially clever or the situation was especially bad. It was like a little bit cloudy and like that was it. They were done for.
It's always a little bit cloudy. What's your plan? I cannot picture them doing this whole complicated scheme more than 5 times and not losing all their people.
Yeah.
It's just, what are the odds you don't attract other dragons too in the process of trying to get this one dragon? You're just flying all around.
Yeah. They never really explain how you can fly a helicopter around without attracting 200 dragons in 5 minutes. But
Van Zandt just says some cryptic stuff like, sky's our domain. It's like, okay, if you say so, man. But what about the dragons? You flew a plane over the ocean and they didn't like notice?
Yeah,
You know?
I guess, they did though. Like he said, he lost 10,000 soldiers in trying to land the plane in Manchester. So
what kind of fucking plane did you have that fit that many people?
I may have exaggerated the number he said, but they did.
Regardless, he's got like 300 people with him when he arrives in this town. And he says he lost hundreds on the flight over. What kind of fucking plane did you have? Did you hijack like a cargo plane?
No, I think it is. I think he says it's a C5. Isn't that one of those big old gigantic planes? Because that's how he got the tank and everything and the chopper. They were all in the belly of this giant cargo plane, which that would be a really fun post-apocalyptic movie in itself.
Yeah, I would watch that.
Yeah.
But no, instead we just get told about it after the fact.
Well, he didn't have time. But like he is losing people exponentially where he shows up with quite a few at the castle and then a day later it's down to him and 2 other people. So
yeah. One of them's not even like one of his people. It's just Quinn. He ends up with Alex and Quinn just staring at each other. Yeah, so that brings us to the main crux of our argument, which is that Van Zandt is not good at his job.
No.
He is a bad dragon hunter, which I guess is better than no dragon hunter, but maybe not because like he continuously brings dragons to this community.
He sucks ass. And it's not going to end here. Like it
gets way worse.
It gets way worse in the 3rd act.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, nobody else had a plan. Quinn's plan was to just huddle in the castle until the dragons went away. And, Van Zandt makes a good point, which we only learn almost an hour into this movie, which is not that long. It's an hour 40 movie.
Right. More than halfway through.
That's when we learn the big plan or even the big concept, which they end up being correct about, that there's only female dragons and 1 male. And if you kill the male, that's the end of the species. But when that revelation comes, it doesn't feel thrilling like, oh my God, it all makes sense. Now we're accelerating. It feels like, why did you wait so long to tell us this was what the movie was about?
I don't really buy the logistics of it either. So it doesn't appear that the Alpha leaves London. Like he's pretty much exactly where he first attacked Quinn and his mom when they get to London later.
Yeah.
How is he fertilizing dragon eggs all over the globe? Or do the other dragons fly to him with their eggs and are like, fertilize my eggs, and then they fly all over the world? Like it just feels kind of impossible.
It doesn't totally hang together. I'm trying to make it work now in my head. It's possible that first they were all out traveling everywhere because there was a lot of food and they just feasted on the earth. But part of the point that they make is that food is slim for everybody, including the dragons. They're kind of starving at this point because they ate everybody.
They turned everything to ash because they eat ash, which probably doesn't have a lot of vitamins and nutrients.
No, you need a lot of it, I would assume. So yeah, maybe they were once more active, but he went back to his home base, which is what he did last time. So he had, according to the lore of this movie, this guy was responsible for killing the dinosaurs. It wasn't a meteor after all.
It was a meat eater.
Oh. He torched them, and then he went back to sleeping under London for a while.
He's a Brit through and through. When he's done with his work, he goes back to London and just has a pint at the old pub and goes to sleep. He's just like me for real. So yeah, we get some more bad dialogue here. Like we tracked the epidemiology of these things and found out, like, how'd you do that? Can you give me some details, or we're just going to take your word for it?
No, we just tracked the epidemiology of these things.
You got to say it like Matthew McConaughey in this movie. We tracked the epidemiology of these things. No blinking. You got to growl every word.
Yeah, he doesn't blink, and you can tell because every scene ends with tears in his eyes because he hasn't blinked, but it evokes more emotion that way.
Also, his big scene of, what is it? Envy the country that has heroes. I say pity the country that needs them. I think Quinn just saved your ass half an hour ago, man. Like,
yeah,
you get the balls to come in there like that. He tells them they disgust him. You just crashed their castle, brought a dragon with all your fucking tanks and heavy machinery, and then have the nerve to get all up in their shit because they're happy.
Yeah.
They've never seen a dead dragon. Like, they've never killed a dragon before.
It's understandably a great moment for them. And yeah, Van Zandt's the one who needed the hero. So who's he carping at? He's the one that you should pity, or whatever does he say? Is that a Shakespeare quote? What was that?
Envy the country that has heroes. I say pity the country that needs them. I don't think that's a quote from anybody. I think that's the Van Zandt original. original.
Okay, so there's one good line. Like that's
Hold on,
that
I'm gonna
sounds
look it up.
poetic.
Yeah, the
The only result is Denton Van Zandt, 2002.
apparently something came up on a Beowulf page, but then it credits Denton Van Zandt as the originator of the quote. So yeah, that's a unusually well-written line for this movie, which kind of draws attention to the other lines in a negative way.
Yeah, that's why we hesitated to give credit to these writers, because that's the only pithy line they came up with.
Maybe that's a McConaughey original.
I wouldn't put it past him.
He seems like a poetic dude.
He does. Yeah.
Watch his Lincoln commercials where he drives around talking nonsense. So we get the big fist fight between Quinn and Van Zandt. It's a pretty brutal fist fight. Quinn gets his shit pushed in like crazy, though. He gets fucking rocked. Van Zandt is throwing these punches from his back pocket and just connecting.
He mounts him in the end, and he's got his shirt off. It gives you everything Hollywood that you wanted from this movie. McConaughey's stripped to the waist. He's looking pretty ripped in this, and he gives poor old Quinn a pounding to have to pull him off before he kills him.
They did actually want Bale to show up like emaciated for the movie.
Oh.
But he said that, you see how fucking yoked McConaughey is? No one's going to buy me in a fist fight with this guy. So he was like, I'm going to start lifting weights, trying to get in shape for this.
He did a good job too. Both these actors are in their prime here.
He'd get his chance a couple years later with The Machinist, or did he do that before this? I can't remember.
Yeah, he's good at transforming his body.
Yeah, he refused to wear a fat suit to play Dick Cheney and just gave himself gout instead.
Oh, Jesus.
Jared Leto did too for that terrible Mark David Chapman movie.
Oh, Lord. These actors. Sometimes it's too much.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So Jared is his little protege. He goes with Van Zandt. That's a nice moment where Quinn says goodbye to him.
But then they reverse it. In the next scene, like, Jared doesn't go through anything. Maybe that's some of the scenes that you talked about they couldn't film, or just something that got edited out. But he has the send-off, like this kid that he says, oh, I'm not your dad, in this very mature way. He's like, if you can talk to me like that, I guess go for it. But not like in a bitter way. Quinn is so Buddha-like in this movie, you almost can't process it because the movie is really dark. But he handles all this tough stuff, these incredible setbacks, having his son go off to what he's sure is his certain death, his adopted son. And he's just humble and he's lighthearted and just genuinely dealing with it in this incredibly Zen-like way that you can't, you're like, what? Wait, it doesn't click.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really figures out who Quinn is. I don't buy that this guy held this community together for 20 years with this kind of wishy-washy, go with the flow attitude.
Yeah, because in between those scenes where he's either amazingly charming with children or amazingly understanding with these difficult situations and the people around him who are giving him nothing but trouble and pain, in between that, there's scenes where he's fist fighting with Van Zandt or yelling at the other guys and being a dick. So it's like those are two different characters.
Yeah.
And it's hard to build movies around Zen-like characters because they don't give you the drama. So I get why you can't just be that, but it's weird to throw that in the mix.
Bale's good at playing like firecrackers. Why not give him a little more personality and just a little more volatility for the rest of the movie? And I think it would have just made it a little more dynamic, a little more captivating.
I like it because I'm personally a fan of Zen as a life philosophy. And so it was like a real inspiration to see a character like that on screen. I think it's kind of cool, even though it's not Hollywood.
It does make the movie feel unique, but I think it kind of undermines what the movie's trying to do at the same time.
Yeah, it confuses us for sure because you just don't expect that.
All right, you want to take us home?
Here we go. Just as they're approaching London, Van Zandt's armored column is ambushed by a dragon. The entire group, except for Alex and Van Zandt, are killed. Then the dragon flies north and attacks the castle, trapping Quinn and the kids in the basement. Van Zandt makes it back to the castle and he frees Quinn, who agrees to join him and Alex on a second do-or-die trip back to London. The two men each have a crossbow with an explosive bolt. So Van Zandt tries to confront the dragon, but he misses his shot. Then he tries to attack it with a giant axe, but no luck. He gets eaten. Quinn then faces the dragon down, and he does not miss, killing the alpha male with a perfect shot down the gullet. Sometime later, Quinn, Alex, and the boy Gerard are seen enjoying blue skies. The dragons are dying off, their community is flourishing, and there is hope for the world.
So they don't do a great job of establishing this in the movie, but that is the alpha that attacks Van Zandt's convoy and then comes back to the castle. We do come upon Van Zandt when Alex finds him sitting there dejected, and he's like, it was him. I guess he like teabagged him while he flew over or something. He knew, like, oh, yeah, that's a boy.
That's a boy dragon.
No, he's like 3 times the size of the other ones. So it was, when he's climbing on the castle, I was like, that's way bigger than the other dragons, but I had to go back and double check.
I didn't pick up on that size difference. You're definitely right about it. I didn't quite pick up on it till later because sometimes I'm just like, is that just shoddy special effects? The scale just kind of goes up and down, but no, that's on purpose.
This isn't Mortal Engines, Ian. No. It's not a great movie, but it's not that bad.
No, they do their best to keep the scales proportionate, but it's
the scales proportionate. Because they're dragons.
Part of my bigger problem with this movie is related to that. The dragons, they don't have a personality and they don't even have a physical characteristic. Like you would think if you're going to make a story about an alpha male, that's really important to know who he is and when he he's on screen, give him a red blaze on his forehead or give him something that makes him stand out. And he really doesn't. The dragons are cool and realistic looking, but they're all just uniformly just gray.
Yeah, the CGI has held up. I'll give them credit for that. When the dragons are moving, they look good. But I feel like they had to skimp on customizing each dragon in order to spend their money elsewhere.
Maybe.
They could build one model and they just had to like change the size of it slightly in every scene. But yeah, like there's really no big differences between the different dragons, which is disappointing because that's always like a fun thing to look for in a movie. Like that one's missing a leg. Like he gives something like that or a characteristic. That one's got no eye. Like his left eye has been shot out at some point. So
yeah, then you go, oh, that's the guy. And that happens with orcs in Lord of the Rings. There's ones that you can tell, oh, that's the guy we have a beef with. Now I recognize him. But because they don't spend enough time on screen, even if they all look the same, a dragon in a lot of fantasy, they're kind of smart. So they actually have personalities.
As smart as humans or smarter in some stories.
Yeah, they interact with the human characters in a way that shows not just brute force kind of battle. And they're not on screen enough time to actually give them a lot of smarts or give them personalities.
I mean, they do seem kind of stupid because they are just recklessly destroying their environment and destroying their potential food sources and all their, oh, wait, we're doing that too. Maybe there is some allegory at work here.
Didn't see that coming.
Is this a global warming allegory?
They show up, they multiply, they flourish, and they burn the shit out of everything, and then they die off.
There should be a scene where the alpha just looks at Van Zandt. He's like, me and you aren't so different after all.
that line of dialogue would have fit right in, I can tell you.
No, but like one thing I did enjoy about House of the Dragon, which I had my problems with, is like you're saying, the dragons have personalities and they all, not only do they all look different, like they look very different, but like when they get old, they get kind of like jowls. I don't know. I know CGI has come a long way in the 20 years between Reign of Fire and House of the Dragon, but just kind of seeing that done so well recently made this feel even more lackluster in that sense.
I mean, it reduces them to the level of a shark movie where it's just like it has to look realistic like a shark, but it doesn't do anything but show up and attack you.
Right. This is the big example of Van Zandt being a fucking idiot because Quinn's like, oh, yeah, I know somebody else who tried to do that. And guess what? They all got killed. And then the dragon followed them back to their fortress and killed all them too. And he's like, so he doesn't really have a comeback for that.
No, he doesn't bother.
He just goes and does it. And exactly what Quinn told him is what happens.
And this crew of soldiers who's supposedly been through a lot of stuff, when they hit a roadblock, when they're getting close to where they know the dragon lives, they hit a roadblock and they all just get out of their armored vehicles and stand in a tight formation along the side of the road so that they can get wiped out in just one pass. And then Van Zandt laments it. He's like, oh man, one pass. They killed everybody.
He's not much of a battle commander. Yeah, he's...
No, it's embarrassing.
It's kind of embarrassing. And Alex is just flying around. What happens to her helicopter, by the way? I couldn't really figure out where her helicopter goes.
They ditched it like just outside of London on the way back from the side of the ambush. They flew back up to the castle. They rescued Quinn. They flew back down to outside London and then they ditched it in the docks.
Right.
It's a real quick glimpse of them dismounting at the docks.
One thing we didn't mention in this movie that seems like it's going to be important is when Van Zandt reveals that the dragons can't see well at dusk. They can see really well during the day and they can see even better at night, he says. But the magic hour at dusk, they can't see shit. And then they just never do anything with that information again.
They mention it again. And then
then they converge on London in broad daylight.
They say they're going to go there at magic hour. They go, okay, we're going to do the attack. And Van Zandt almost turns to the camera and goes, magic hour. And then they show up at noon and they start fighting. It's like, you couldn't wait, huh?
Yeah. And fighting is putting it, that's a strong word for what happens here. Van Zandt he hits the dragon with his explosive bolt, just not in the right spot. So it's kind of cool that the dragon's billowing smoke out as it's flying now. That's a cool visual.
Yeah.
But his big plan is to pull out a battle axe and just jump at it. The thing eats him in one bite. Like, it's hilarious.
The fact that he got the one shot off and the thing flew away smoking and sputtering for a minute, he could have climbed down that tower that he was on and tried something else. Yeah. But he's like, no, that was my one shot. So next time if the dragon comes back, I'm going to jump off a 150-foot tower and get snatched up midair like a fucking Cheeto.
Best case, it's murder-suicide. If he kills the dragon with a well-placed blow, he's still falling from the height of that tower.
Yeah.
And probably landing on his back and dying.
But yeah, again, unintended humor that it was like peak of all his futile and embarrassing attempts to do something that was the silliest.
He literally doesn't succeed at anything the entire movie. He kills one dragon and loses 3 guys in the process and needs Quinn's help to do it.
Yeah. He's a good shot with that first thing. The dragon that he does kill that Quinn helps lead him into, he takes that down pretty good. He's not a buffoon. Like, we know that the movie's not trying to tell us that he was a poser the whole time, but he's really unlucky, maybe.
Really unlucky is putting it lightly. One thing I really hated about the London fight is this plot mechanism they come up with where like, oh, the alpha, he's eating all the lady dragons. Like they're going to fly away now. Oh, they're all gone. Now we don't have to render any more dragons up close.
Yeah.
We can just do one big shot of all the lady dragons flying away and get rid of them.
Or figure out how to kill them, because they get there and they're spying. They're spying on London. I don't know how you spy on a city. Is there like a little wall you can climb up outside of every city where you can just see the whole city? That's what they
brought
found.
a bunch of quarters for the viewfinders.
So they're spying on London, and there's so many of these smaller lady dragons swarming around. And then you're right, the big guy comes out, he eats one of them to show how starving they are, and the rest of them just vamoose so that we can have a final scene that works with crossbows and not with nuclear weapons.
Right. They tried nuclear weapons already, or they hinted that they tried it and it didn't work.
That was a mistake.
If Quinn would just share some of his protein shakes with the dragons, they wouldn't be so mad all the time.
Bust him out a case of muscle milk and just give him a little snack.
Clearly, when society fell apart, he was like, oh, I'm off to GNC. That's kind of it. They get out. Alex, who's super hot, but definitely not American, and Quinn are in love now.
There's a new family. Everything gets real bright and cheery at the end.
It's the first time we've seen blue skies in the entire movie. Even in the intro section in England, like in London, when in 2000, it's gray and dreary. It's not a colorful movie.
Yeah, no, it turns around quick at the end with a happy ending. They're putting up radio towers. Jared is the new leader, and he's talking to French girls on the radio. It's like, everything's nice.
And that's Reign of Fire. What was I feel like we went back and forth on this. Like we each kind of flip-flopped on this one a little bit.
Yeah.
Where do you end up on it? What's your takeaway from this? Is it a movie that you would recommend?
I'm not sure I would recommend it. You'd have to be really into it for some more specific reason than just looking for a good fantasy, sci-fi, post-apocalyptic story, because it's not that fun as that. It's fun if you like these actors, if you're like a big McConaughey fan and you're like, oh, you haven't seen this one, you got to see him in this. I would say that's true.
Yeah, it's a good McConaughey performance. Bale's a little stilted.
And now I'm glad I watched it because we had fun dissecting it, and I like it more as a movie that accidentally did all these ironic and humorous things, but it's not that when you're watching it for the first time. It's okay. If you just needed to have a movie on that had some action in it in the background, you wouldn't be offended by it, but it's kind of a letdown.
I definitely don't hate this movie. It's got like a Shaggy Dog quality to it that I appreciate. It has its charms, and I respect the fact that it was kind of made by amateurs to a degree. Not like the crew, not like the grips and the lighting guys, but the original script was written by two guys that had never written anything for Hollywood ever and had never wrote anything else again.
Yeah, that's a clue. That's a sign of something.
And like even the big name they brought in to punch it up had two screenwriting credits before this, and one of them was Halloween H2O.
Yeah.
And the other was Children of the Corn 3 Urban Harvest.
Yeah.
These aren't like big names.
That's a movie that you have to ask whether you actually leave that on your resume or not.
Exactly. So it kind of is a triumph in some degree when you consider that. And
yeah.
Rob Bowman, he didn't have much of a career after this either in movies. He's a big time TV director, which seems to be like a running theme with a lot of the guys we cover on here. They tried to make the leap. It didn't work out. So they went back to TV, which is not a bad living.
Soft landing. Yeah.
But he directed something like 35 episodes of the X-Files and
Nice.
that first X-Files movie, which as I mentioned in the monologue, I do really enjoy.
Cool.
Not the sequel. The sequel was not good. He was also like one of the creators of Castle, that Nathan Fillion show.
Oh, okay.
We just talked about Nathan Fillion a little bit because he pops up in Guardians 3.
He's great in that. And I think I watched a little bit of Castle. He's a fun actor. And
Yeah, I'm a big Nathan fan. He was on Lost.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Briefly. He had
Okay.
a little story arc. But my wife used to watch Castle. I guess there was a lot of drama on the set of Castle, though.
Oh.
Like Nathan Fillion and the female lead didn't get along at all.
Ooh.
Really bad. They stopped being in scenes together after a while.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So the last thing he directed was Elektra, the
Okay.
Jennifer Garner Elektra movie, which is, I would say, a future episode, but I don't want to watch that again.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, I never
maybe
saw
one
it, but
day.
it's not well liked
It's not good.
from what I hear.
I hate the Daredevil movie too, the Ben Affleck one. I think it was good casting. Ben Affleck as Daredevil. It's good. It just wasn't. It was way too butt rocky.
Okay.
But Charlie Cox is better anyway. So Matt Greenberg, the writer, like I mentioned, he hasn't done much else since this either, but he did write 1408, which is not bad. The Stephen King, John Cusack, Samuel L. Jackson movie in a
Yeah.
hotel. He wrote Mercy, and he got a story credit on the 2019 Pet Sematary remake. So I don't know what his involvement was there, but he was involved with that somehow. So he seems like he's stuck to horror and
Yeah.
King horror, because Children of the Corn was based on a King story. Like,
That's right.
The first one.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always
He's
forget
deep in
that.
it's deep in Kingland there.
But let's check in on some of the actors. You want to see what they've been up to and what they were up to right before this?
Yeah.
Like we mentioned, Bale was still relatively under the radar compared to his current standing. He'd follow this up with Equilibrium, which bombed hard, kind of like a fun Matrix ripoff, but not the best movie. Then he would do The Machinist, and he was actually in Howl's Moving Castle, which I always forget.
Oh, yeah. Is he Howl?
I think he is Hal.
I think he is, right?
Yeah, good movie.
Howl is the weird magician who shows up and woos the girl.
Speaking of weird magicians, he would pop up in The Prestige then, too.
There you go. There's a
yeah.
weird magician for you. He was fun in that.
I kind of want to rewatch The Prestige. I love that movie.
Yeah.
But then in 2005, he became Batman, which is obviously a huge role for him, even though he kind of grew to hate it, which seems to happen to a lot of these guys that sign up for huge superhero franchises.
Yeah, you can understand it.
Then he'd pop up in The New World, the Terrence Malick movie, which is a future episode also.
Okay.
As John Rolfe, big name in that story.
Don't know anything about that one.
Oh, it's like the retelling of the John Smith Pocahontas.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think more true to life than the Pocahontas animated film that we all know.
Probably not hard to achieve.
Probably not. And then inexplicably, he was cast as an LA gangbanger in David Ayer's Harsh Times, because David Ayer can only make one kind of movie, which is about LA gangbangers, even if it's about superheroes or orcs. It's all got to be about LA gangbangers. That was a miscasting. Like, that movie wasn't terrible, but he wasn't the guy to play that. He cast Shia LaBeouf as an LA gangbanger recently.
That's what happens if you get sucked into Ayer world.
And then he would do The Prestige after that with Nolan, 3:10 to Yuma, and then Dark Knight. That's a good little stretch right there. But then he would do the Terminator Salvation movie in 2009, which was pretty bad and also kind of ruined his public image when the audio of him freaking out on, I don't know, was it a lighting guy? I don't even remember what the circumstances were, but he just got super pissed at a crew member. The whole rant's on YouTube. If you were on the internet at all back then, you've heard it. It's been memed to death. Family Guy did a thing about it's a thing.
I remember that really did turn me off to him. I'm somebody who's sensitive to confrontation in general and just people being nasty. So I'm like, I don't like this guy. And it took me a while to even want to see him in a movie after that.
I know. I was the same way, especially like now when we consider the power dynamics more between actors on set and like crew members and how unbalanced that is. But then more details about the situation came out. And it's like, maybe this guy really was being kind of a nuisance on set, but the way he went about it was certainly not okay, regardless.
Yeah.
He hasn't done like a lot of image rehab. He just kind of hasn't had an incident in a long time. So people are starting to warm up to him again.
Started to forget.
Then he would do the Michael Mann bomb Public Enemies with Johnny Depp about the Dillinger Gang, which isn't bad. Good hat movie. If you like hat movies, that's a good one.
Okay.
He's done some real dog shit too, like Exodus, Gods and Kings. He plays Moses. Amsterdam, which I haven't, you tried to watch and said it was baffling. I haven't even tried to tackle yet, but we will have to eventually.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come to that.
Sadly, he likes to work with David O. Russell a lot. He was in American Hustle, The Fighter, which his performance as Dickie in The Fighter is just top notch. Great performance. And then Ford versus Ferrari, The Big Short, but he only has one movie in development right now, and it's called The Church of Living Dangerously. And it sounds fucking sweet. It's going to be cool. It's about a priest who somehow becomes a high-level drug runner for a Mexican cartel.
Whoa.
And it's apparently like a thriller. I'm super into the Narcos world.
Yeah.
And, sounds like it's going to be up my alley for sure.
Cool. That sounds fun.
You ready to talk a little bit about All Right, Man?
Yeah, I guess that's all right.
All right. I think McConaughey was like, when I was looking at his filmography, I got the sense that he was doing like the one for me, one for you thing around this point in his career. And I feel like this was his one for me, which is interesting.
Well, interesting choice for that.
Because he was doing romantic comedies and like thrillers, flip-flopping between them.
Okay.
And these real kind of The Wedding Planner, and then he did Frailty, which two movies that could not be more different. We were supposed to do Frailty. We moved it off the schedule for some reason. I absolutely love that movie. He's phenomenal in it. And then he would do 13 Conversations About One Thing and Reign of Fire. Then he would do How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and Tiptoes, which the less said about that's the Gary Oldman is a little guy. He's a small person.
Whoa. Okay.
But like they literally just had him like kneel into his shoes and shuffle around to be a little person. It was
Tim Conway style. It's weird.
It was really bad. It was filmed in like the 90s and just released in 2003. But I think like Renee Zellweger might be in it too. It's got like a crazy good cast for what it is.
Did it make money?
It never got released theatrically.
Okay.
It has a director's cut. What the fuck? It's credited to Bill Weiner because Matthew Bright removed his name from the movie.
Oh, okay. It's never a great sign.
He never worked after this either.
Dang.
Yeah, this seems like a career ruiner. Gary Oldman, Kate Beckinsale, Patricia Arquette, Matthew McConaughey, and Peter Dinklage is the cast.
Oh, wow.
But then he would do Sahara, which is definitely a future episode. Huge flop.
I feel like swashbuckling flops are core. They're essential to the Blast Zone canon.
Absolutely. It's not exactly a pirate movie, but it's kind of a pirate movie.
Yeah.
He would do Two for the Money, which was another flop, and then Failure to Launch, another rom-com. He would do We Are Marshall, and then Fool's Gold, And then he would become, I think where he got his mojo back for real was when he was Rick Peck in Tropic Thunder, Ben Stiller's agent.
Oh.
It was a smaller part, but
that.
he's really committed to it and he's going for it and he's pretty funny. And then he just went on an absolutely killer run in the first half of the 2010s. He did Killer Joe, Mud, Magic Mike, Dallas Buyers Club, Wolf of Wall Street, Interstellar, plus True Detective.
Some good stuff in there.
That's all from like 2010 to 2015. Just nuts.
Yeah. Mud is a sleeper for anybody who hasn't watched that. That kicks ass.
Mud's a great movie. Yeah, I really enjoy that movie. It's good neo-noir with kind of like that Appalachian dirtbag element to it that I enjoy.
And the rare, youthful, like teenage hero that really works and sells it. Really good stuff.
Speaking of which, have you watched Winter's Bone yet?
I think I started it and never did.
Put it on your list.
Okay.
After Briar Patch. But then, so his second half of the 2010s and up to current day has not been as good. He was in stuff like Sea of Trees, Free State of Jones, Dark Tower, and The Other Serenity. But he's been awesome as Buster Moon in the Sing movies.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
He's a koala, I think. But he's adorable.
Okay, yes, I can picture him now.
I love those movies. I won't apologize for it.
No, you shouldn't.
And then Izabella Scorupco, who I had a massive crush on.
It's funny how many of the movies that John picks for this show end up with that little storyline in the background.
I just love women, okay? I'm sorry.
Okay.
And men.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not in the same way, obviously. Oh, I don't know where I'm going with this. So in the States, I think Izabella Scorupco was mostly known for Goldeneye. Even you pointed that out. You were like, oh, I didn't really see Goldeneye. And that's the only movie I recognize on her filmography.
Yeah, totally.
But she was also in Vertical Limit, which was another Martin Campbell action movie after Goldeneye.
Okay.
And then she was in that doomed Exorcist prequel, The Beginning, which was like that weird thing where like Paul Schrader made an Exorcist prequel that studio hated so much. They took some of it and kept it and then refilmed most of it and just made a brand new movie out of it. And then they eventually ended up releasing Schrader's version too, and they all bombed. It was we'll have to do it one day. It's a very strange labyrinth of studio fuckery.
I remember hearing about that.
But she hasn't done really any English language acting since then and hasn't acted at all since 2018.
Okay.
So she seems semi-retired now. She was also a pop star in Poland.
Oh, neat. Good for her.
So that's Reign of Fire. Did you have any closing thoughts?
Should I bring up the closing of the movie? You mentioned Butt Rock, which we rarely skip over when it comes up. Did you listen to the song in the credits of this movie?
No, I skipped it. What is it bad?
It is by a band called Mad Gravity. I had to look it up. They formed a year before this movie and they broke up a year after. And it's just the most generic 90s, 2000s rock. I'm not an expert on the genre. I was like getting Alice in Chains vibes, but I have no idea if that's really a good reference.
What was the band name?
Mad at Gravity.
Man, I was big into the rock scene back then, and I don't recognize that name at all.
I read their little bio. They basically just popped up, got a deal, recorded a couple songs for this movie, and then they broke up because they couldn't get along with their lead singer within like a year. It's just like a cheesy tag to a movie that disappoints in many ways. Nice little capper to it.
I'm tempted to go watch and listen to it because I love a good butt rock song.
I want to hear your take on it.
Totally.
Maybe we'll have to follow up.
Yeah, we might just talk about it on next week's episode.
Yeah.
Speaking of next week's episode, do you want to know what we're covering?
Oh, I sure do, because I think you told me, but I forgot and I haven't watched anything.
I did. So we're going to do Captive State, which is a movie I've never seen, but always wanted to. I remember the original trailer for it being really cool and creepy. It's 2019 science fiction thriller. All I know is like aliens have invaded Earth, but they're just like kind of running shit. They've recruited some humans to help them. And then there's like a rebellion rising up. Unfortunately, the reviews weren't great and ended up bombing, but I thought the premise was so cool. I really want to give it a chance. So
we're on a little premise run here where we had a great premise this week, a little soggy execution. Let's see what they can do for us. Captive State.
Totally. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. Follow us on Twitter, never X, never doing that, at BlastZonePod. Email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Got a great suggestion for Blasttober from a listener, Van, recently that I threw on the schedule. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Keep sending in those suggestions. And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
Blast Zone.